Thank you to Squarespace for sponsoring today's video, because your boy contributed to this hype. That's my ego talking. I gotta put that out there. I was one of the first people. So these two cameras have gotten me so much hate. It's crazy, especially in the last year. This is the Leica QP, this is the Leica Q2, and today we are talking about the Leica Q hype that is happening on the internet right now. It seems like every YouTuber is getting a Leica Q2. It seems like more and more people are finding out about the brand, and in particular this point and shoot camera. So today I want to share my perspective on this, being a long-time Leica Q user, and not to humble brag or anything like that, but I feel like I was one of the first people on YouTube, especially in the photography space. Not the first. Plenty of people were using this camera before me, but one of the first to really experiment with this Leica QP back in 2019 and use it consistently throughout my videos. And I originally purchased this camera because it made sense for me at the time. The types of things that I was photographing, this seemed like the perfect tool for everything that I was doing with this YouTube channel and with my goals with photography, and that proved to be true. And then the Leica Q2 is something I picked up recently to upgrade from this, but I haven't gotten to use it as much as I would like, just because it's winter and I'm a little bit uninspired right now, if I'm being completely honest. So in today's video, I'm going to show a bunch of examples from my favorite shoots using this Leica Q, just so you can get an idea of what this camera is capable of. So where did all this hype come from? I really feel like in the last year, we've seen a general shift in what people expect from their cameras. Before, DSLRs, mirrorless, quality was everything. And now we're seeing this transition in social media, with TikTok, with Instagram Reels, just with influencers in general, trying to get pictures in a more casual, everyday type way. They're less worried about production and quality, and they're more worried about telling a story and capturing an actual moment. And this camera, being the Leica Q, threads this needle between extremely high professional quality and getting those day-to-day type moments and being able to tell a story, whether on your social media, for your business, or just in your personal life. And that combination is the reason why it's caught the attention of so many influential people on YouTube in the last year. For example, Peter McKinnon picked up a Leica Q2 and he made a video about it. I think it got close to 1 million views. That is 1 million people who may not have been exposed to the Leica brand prior to that video. And then you have other creators like Maddie Hopeja, pretty much every YouTuber out there picking up one of these, testing it out, trying to understand what all the hype is about on a $6,000 point and shoot. And I got to admit, it's been pretty cool to see this hype around the brand of Leica, because when I first started photography, I found out about Leica because my dad, who was a photographer, told me that that was the camera that he eventually wanted to get. He wanted a Leica M. He explained to me what it was all about, and I started watching Digital Rev Kai videos to kind of understand more about the brand. But when you look back on that time period on YouTube, especially the Digital Rev channel, that channel has kind of been lost in the sauce of all the content posted to YouTube every day, especially in the camera space. So you have an entirely new generation of people being exposed to the Leica brand for the first time by influential people like Peter McKinnon, maybe Pierre Lambert, maybe myself, whoever it is. So the hype around the brand, I think, is a really cool thing. And another thing that's driving this hype is just the general brand essence of Leica. There is a level of exclusivity to it, and there's more barriers to entry. For example, if you're someone who doesn't run a photography business, you don't have a YouTube channel like this, it's hard to justify spending $6,000 on a point and shoot camera. But if you're someone who's making all their money utilizing this as a tool, it does make sense to make that purchase. So someone who's casually watching YouTube and sees my video about the camera might think I'm ridiculous for spending this amount of money on something, because they don't have the perspective or the reason to spend that type of money. It makes no sense to them. And also, when it comes to Leica cameras, you're really paying for the lenses on the camera. You're not exactly paying for the camera body or the technology. People love to make the argument that you can get the same result from any camera that you can get with a Leica, and I would tend to agree if we're comparing camera bodies to camera bodies. But what makes Leica special is the lenses that you get from that company. Leica lenses are undefeated. I know this from all the experience I have with the Q, from the Q2, as well as the Leica lenses that I own for my SL2. There is something about these M lenses that just just looks different. I can't explain it. I know people are gonna say that's kind of a what do you call it, a anecdotal statement, and it depends on the person viewing it, but in my 10 years of experience viewing photographs and making photographs, I can tell you there's a quantifiable difference when you're using an M lens, and that is why these are so expensive, is because you're getting one of Leica's best lenses on a small point and shoot camera body. But people still love to argue the fact that you only have one lens here, one option, and you could go out and buy a Sony camera and lenses for the exact same cost as this. And honestly, I can't argue with you there. It does make a lot more sense if you're trying to pursue photography or videography to get any other option out there. This is a camera that fits into a very specialized niche of needs that you're going to have as a photographer, and most people are not going to have that. And the reason why a lot of influential people like me with YouTube channels and social media presence have this camera is because it fits into that mold. It's like a perfect storm of hype right here, essentially. The people who this camera is made for are the people who are going to need it to propel their social media brand even more and then share it with y'all, even though you probably don't need it unless you're trying to do the exact same thing as me or someone like Peter McKinnon. And another thing that is driving the hype around these cameras right now is an unfortunate one, and I almost don't even want to talk about it because I don't want to make people feel bad, but it's the fact that Leica cameras and lenses have a financial barrier to access them. They are extremely expensive, and most people can't afford them unless they have a photography business or a creative business that requires them, or they're making a lot of money elsewhere and they're doing this as a hobby. And that level of exclusivity kind of rubs people the wrong way. Now, I want to be the first to say that if you don't own a Leica camera or can't afford one, there is nothing wrong with that. I don't want to diminish you at all, and that's never my intention with a video about any of these cameras. I'm not showing off, I'm just talking about something that's relevant to me that I do think is cool that people are interested in. But if you can't afford one of these, don't worry about it. I had wanted a Leica camera for a long time, basically since the minute I started photography, and it took me years and years of work to get to the point where I could just empty my business bank account to afford this, which, looking in hindsight, was probably not the smartest financial decision at the time, but it ended up working out in the end. A lot of the photos in my last book were made using this camera, and I don't think that book would have been possible without having this tool at my disposal. But that really summarizes my point of view on why these cameras are getting the amount of hype that they're getting right now, and we all know how hype is. It's like a snowball. Once it starts rolling out of control and more people start buying into it and more people start buying the camera, the hype and the clout around it just continues to grow. And I think that's what's happening with these Leica cameras right now, is more and more people are seeing more and more people use them, and it's just snowballing into this big thing. But from my perspective, it's still just a camera. Even though this is numbered out of 150, I've been using it a lot. I actually got a scratch on it right there. Some of the Leica purists out there are going to be mad at me for it, but at the end of the day, I just love using these for what they are. They're a perfect mix of form and function. They're beautiful cameras that also work well, and they're very easy to use, and they get the job done. Now, I want to share some personal thoughts on whether or not these cameras are overrated, if the hype is justified in my own experience. But before we do that, I want to thank the sponsor on today's video, Squarespace. If you're a photographer out there looking to grow your photography business, step number one should be to establish a website and also establish something that you're giving to your audience, whether it's a mailing list that they can subscribe to, or simply a blog where they can follow what you're doing, or having products available like prints and presets. No one makes it easier to do this than Squarespace. And I recently redesigned my website, evanranft.com. I got a whole new template, and it took me about an afternoon to create this new website. These drag and drop templates are so easy to customize and design, and there are more options than ever on Squarespace. When I first started using Squarespace almost 5 years ago, the template selection was minimal, but they have expanded so far now that you can do anything on Squarespace site. It's amazing how customizable these websites are, and later this year I plan on making a tutorial about how I built evanranft.com after I finish a few things on that site. But Squarespace is hooking up everyone on this channel with a free trial. You can just go to squarespace.com/evanranft, build a trial site. When you're ready to sign up, you can use code evanranft to save 10%. That's squarespace.com/evanranft to start a free trial, and use code evanranft to save 10% when you're ready to sign up. Squarespace is the easiest place to build a website on the internet, and I appreciate them for being a part of this channel. Now let's get into some of my personal thoughts with the Leica cameras in general and whether or not the hype is worth it. Personally, I actually am just going to give away the answer right now. I don't think the hype is worth it because this is such a specialized camera. There's actually much better options out there for 90% of people. And here's what I mean by that. The first major issue with the Leica Q is the fact that it's a point and shoot camera, but it's not necessarily compact. This lens right here, it's big. I can't put this in my back pocket. I can't put it in any pocket for that matter, unless I'm wearing a hoodie, which for me isn't a big deal, but I do love cameras like the Fuji X100V because that is a camera you can actually slide into your pocket, and I wish those cameras were not sold out because it would be great to have one. I wish I never gave away my last one, but you live and you learn. I wish I still had one of those cameras simply because of the convenience. So this is not your traditional point and shoot camera. Now the other side of that coin is the fact that the lens on these Leica Q2s is phenomenal. I mean, absolutely incredible. So you're paying for the lens with this camera. You're not really paying for the camera body or any of the technology in there, and that's another reason why this doesn't make sense for everyone. Most people are going to need a camera that does photo and video, and they're going to need some type of variety in their lenses. So it makes a lot more sense to spend $6,000 on a good camera body and 2 good lenses and have that camera body be capable of great photos as well as great video, because the Leica Q series for video, it's just not made for it. It does it, you can get away with it in certain scenarios, but it's pretty obvious that this camera was built for more point and shoot style photography. Now, for me, I love street photography with this camera. I think it's great, but I prefer the sensor on the Leica Q1 versus the Leica Q2, especially for low light. There's something about the files on this camera that are just magical. They're probably my favorite raw files that I've ever had, and the Q2 is good, but they just don't have something that the Q has. So my recommendation to anyone out there who's curious about these cameras, maybe wants to buy into some of this hype, is check out one of the original Qs. They're fairly inexpensive on the used market. You want to make sure you look for one that's been gently used. You don't want to get some crazy beat up one, even though these are pretty tough cameras. I've had this for a couple years now, and there's very little sign of wear on this. I'm not sure if it's because of this PVD coating or what, but honestly, the Q2 I have looks a little bit more beat up than this Q, which I've been using since 2019. So I don't know what that is or if there's any evidence to support that. It's just my own personal opinion. So if you're curious about these cameras, you're buying into the hype, maybe check out a Q1. You'll get basically the same result as the Q2, if not a better result depending on the situation, for a fraction of the price. But my final thoughts on this whole thing, the hype around Leica cameras, is one, don't lump me into the conversation of people buying into the hype, because your boy probably contributed to this hype. I was one of the first people. I got to just put that out there. That's my ego talking. I got to make it clear that I was one of the OGs of the Leica Q. But other than that, it's very important to understand that this is a camera that is not for everyone, and it doesn't have to be for everyone. And if you don't buy into the hype of this, that is completely okay. You're probably better off, like I said, getting a good camera with some good lenses. But if you find yourself in that small group of people who needs a daily carry camera that is also incredibly professional and delivers the best results, I can't argue that this is definitely number one. And if that's your perspective, the hype is 100% worth it. Nothing beats the Q2 or the Q if you're someone who actually needs what it offers.